Welcome, everyone. My name is Jeremy Crow, and tonight we have a special guest, Darren White. Darren is the host of the Darkly Splendid Abodes podcast and the founder of Toronto Thelema. Welcome, Darren.
Thank you, Jeremy. Thank you very much for having me. And 93, as we Thelemites are wont to say.
93. So let's get into this Darkly Splendid Abodes podcast. What inspired you to launch that podcast? And
Ah.
yeah, how did it get started?
Well, basically, it was kind of a collaborative idea, mainly between me and Michael, who does the deep dips. I think that was when I originally sort of suggested the idea. I loved the idea of just having an excuse to kind of put some of my background knowledge to use with doing like audio recording and like films related stuff, and doing it towards actually exploring Thelemic ideas and Aleister Crowley's writings and that sort of thing, but also exploring philosophy in general from a sort of, as it says in the introduction to the podcast, from a sort of practical standpoint, is which is how I kind of see a lot of magical work. It's one of the things I love about the idea of the occult sciences. But basically, Michael was really into the idea as well. We initially were thinking doing the deep dips, and luckily we had I had Edward as well, who does a lot of the episodes, and we've had some other guests and that sort of thing. But really, I feel like it's like the biggest impetus is helping to provide more content to put out there. I hate the term content, but like getting more stuff out there that is talking about Thelema in a way that's taking it seriously and really interested in it and engaging with it, and hopefully talking about it in a way that's not just surface level, because I think there's a lot of stuff that's it's easy to find surface level stuff, or stuff that's kind of pandering to the luridness of Aleister Crowley and that sort
Mm,
of thing, and so basically kind of normalizing a lot of the Thelemic culture and the Thelemic ideas and practices and that sort of thing. That's kind of been my driving impulse behind the scenes in a lot of ways.
oh, very cool. Um, how would you say that it's shaped your understanding of Thelema?
Yeah, one of the fun things about it is like just having to prepare for things where I'm actually reading up on the things with the mentality of actually talking about it, is a good excuse for actually really engaging with the material. So it's been really good in that sense, where I mean, I've always been an avid reader and avidly kind of going through this material again and again, but doing it with this kind of an approach, and being able to discuss it with other people really helps, I find, create this sort of feedback effect where I might have my ideas when I'm just reading it in isolation, but it, having to prepare for a discussion about it, and even just having the discussion about it, you end up bouncing ideas back and forth, so that you end up with something that's like much greater than just the sum of the two people having the discussion. So that's one of my favorite aspects of just, this kind of a platform, being able to talk to somebody else on these subjects that we're so passionate about.
Right. And also, you get to share that conversation with other people that might find it interesting as well.
Yeah, and that's one of the cool things too, because it's I think you don't really know if it's going to take off and be a huge thing, or if it's just going to be your own little thing that maybe five people listen to. And I think it's kind of in between, where we have listeners, we have people with feedback, and people who do check in with us and that sort of thing, but it's not like it's massive. It's a very niche kind of subject, so we don't get to full of ourselves on things or anything like that. So that's kind of nice. And it also doesn't get to that weird critical mass thing where it starts kind of getting away with itself. Like we don't. It's not monetized. It's completely just doing it because we love it. So it's
Mhm.
nice that it's in that realm. So it's still, completely controlled and being done for the reasons that we want to do it. So that's one of the nice things about it as well. It's a total passion project.
Another passion project of yours is Toronto Thelema, and that's been around a lot longer. When I first encountered it, you were referring to it as Toronto Thelema Group.
Yeah.
And one of actually the first public live presentation that I ever gave, like in person, was at a Toronto Thelema Group
Yeah.
event that you had produced, and it was at
Yeah.
the world's biggest bookstore, which
Yeah. That.
sadly doesn't exist anymore in
Yeah.
Toronto.
Yeah.
But that was really fun. We had a lot of really cool presentations. I remember. Tell me a little bit about the founding of that, like the reason that you decided to put together Toronto Thelema, and like how long ago it was that you started, and how it's evolved over time.
Yeah, it was really, I guess, when I started reaching out to the other Thelemites that I could meet in person. I initially reached out to the OTO, and with many people, didn't really hear anything back for months. Seems to be kind of the MO in a lot of ways, but at least here in Toronto, I'm sure there's different experiences in different places and that sort of thing. But there's just been not as much action here in Toronto, that's for sure. But uh, I was on that fence where I was kind of like, okay, do I just stick to doing my own thing in my own way and keeping this kind of like as a secret part of my life, or do I reach out and actually find other people to interact with? And I did send that little, message out into the aether to see if anybody responded. And when I didn't get a response initially, I kind of assumed, well, I guess that was my shot at that, so I'll just stick to doing it on my own. But then when I got a response back, finally, I started to meet other people. And one of the things that happened when I was chatting with somebody else in the community, we started discussing ideas excitedly about, maybe we could put together like group like chats and talks, host talks and that sort of thing. And that specific thing didn't materialize, but I ended up meeting somebody in the community who was kind of doing chats in his like talks in his own private residence, and for 3 people, 4 people kind of thing, so small groups. And I decided to take the initiative and sort of help take things to the next level, where it was like I started organizing these talks at the world's biggest bookstore and having him basically putting on the talks. I gave one myself, and tried to basically, I've always kind of tried to avoid giving the talks myself, but it's like I'm more about trying to facilitate other people in that respect. But yeah, we would get basically anyone who is interested from the community, get them involved in that sort of thing. So, and that was really the idea behind Toronto Thelema. It was always kind of like the idea being that it was not like an organization, not like a temple, not an order or anything like that. It was just always supposed to be this community effort. This and we always with the idea that it was supposed to be helping to facilitate any groups that were in the community, so like the OTO or any of the temple systems and that sort of thing. None of them particularly liked the idea, because I think there's this sense of like, not wanting to, basically feeling like threatened by anything that's outside of their own borders and that sort of thing. So which was not my intention in the least. And I think, like, one group would think that I was sort of headhunting for this other group, and they would think I was headhunting for this other group. And then it's like, I'm always very much trying, specifically going out of my way to avoid any of that kind of thing going on. But, such is the nature of things. So, but yeah, that was really where it came from. It was always with this idea of community, building a Thelemic community that was also open to the greater occult community as well, and not specific. Like, we have people all the time, and going all the way back, we've had people who are interested in Thelema, but we've also had people from all other, uh, you know, uh, backgrounds, interests, passions, paths, who have been coming out and kind of feel like it's a place where they can come in and out of, maybe, or even just come out to frequently and still not identify as Thelemites and that sort of thing. And I value that, because I think it's wonderful to be able to actually get like all these different perspectives, so that we're not just in this little bubble, just constantly regurgitating or bouncing back echoes of our own ideas. We instead get all these different ideas coming in from other places as well.
Yeah, I love that. And that's something that I think that you and I share, is that drive to build bridges and to create the environment that facilitates cross-pollination between different paths and different perspectives. And that's something that I've tried to do a lot in the work that I've done in the Luciferian community. And I see you doing that same thing in the Thelemic community. So I really appreciate that about what you do, and I really resonate with it.
Yeah, I think I probably talked about this briefly when you were nice enough to be a guest on my podcast. I feel like we tend to. I feel like we resonate quite a number of ways. We kind of have a lot of similar perspectives and approaches to things. So, which I've always appreciated. And yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, we've known each other going back. I don't remember exactly when it would have been, but maybe 2012, something like that. Actually, definitely 2012 was when you had put on that first Left Hand Pass festival, right?
Yeah, so it was at least as far back as 2012 for sure.
Yeah.
Maybe further, but yeah, definitely at least as far back as 2012.
Yeah, yeah.
And when did you actually start Toronto Thelema?
That would have been, I guess, just probably around the end of 2009. I got my first initiations into a couple of orders in 2009, and that's, um, you know, it would have been around that time. I can't remember if it was just before that or just after that, but it was around that time. So, yeah, and there was a period where Toronto Thelema kind of wasn't. It was kind of in a period of silence, as I had kind of backed away from the community and gone and done the hermit thing for a little while, and that was. I think around 2016, 2017. And then I came back into the community to start getting things going with Toronto Thelema, and to help sort of just reach out and create a community in that sense again, after COVID. So this is like 2022, where we started getting it going again. And surprisingly, there was very right away, there was like a few people coming out and that sort of thing. So just going back to the monthly meetups, and it was very pretty much right away that we had like, back to the 6 or 7 people coming out per week, per month. And then very quickly, or I guess over time, progressively over time, we started getting bigger and bigger. It's not like huge, but there's definitely a decent amount of people that come out on a monthly basis now. So
Yeah, well, the last one that I attended was a few months back. I think it was in August. Or no, yeah, maybe in August.
July or August, yeah.
And there was quite a few people there, and I thought that it was great. There was people kind of broke off. This was the casual hangout, not like a public lecture or prepared talk, but it was just the hangout basically.
Yeah.
And people would form, their own kind of little circles, and they would talk, and then they would break up and form new ones, and people
Hmm.
were kind of mingling around each other. It was pretty fun.
Yeah, yeah. It's cool. There's a vibrant kind of community there. And, of course you'll have, sometimes it'll be less people, sometimes it'll be more people and that sort of thing. And um it's funny because, over time you inevitably have like things going on, and adventures to be had, and social interactions, and stuff that goes on. And we've gotten to the point where we joke about it, like being like, oh, I wonder what's going to happen in the next season, very much
Yeah, like
like
a drama.
yeah.
What is your take on the role of community in general within Thelemic practice, as opposed to, like, say, solitary work?
Hmm. It's a good question. I mean, and I've been asked that question. I've been confronted with that question of like, what is the purpose of Toronto Thelema? What am I going for? And it seems so obvious to me, to the point that when I try to think about how to explain it, it just disappears. It's like I don't know how
Hmm.
to get across what the purpose is, except for the fact that it's like, to me it makes a lot of sense. But I think that, to answer your question, uh the idea of like somebody's personal work is fundamentally important. Like doing the work is fundamentally important, in my opinion. And I think that's something that should come first, frankly. But the idea of the community, it's very easy to have people who come out to social things that aren't doing the work, that aren't, they don't really have that personal sort of thing. A lot of people do. A lot of people do, but you can also have people who don't so much. But I feel like by having the community thing, it getting people involved, getting people, feeling like it's something they can engage with. If nothing else, it creates a sort of environment in which people can sort of see that there are people who are actually doing these things, and it's something that you can actually integrate in your lifestyle and take seriously. Not something that's got to be completely. Because one of my passions is mental health, and how that pertains to occult practices, because I've seen so much of how things can go wrong on that end. I've engaged with so many people with varying degrees of, what we tend to call mental health, or um, difficulty with mental health and that sort of thing. And it's such a broad array, and it's the type of thing that changes over time. I feel like being able to have a community in which you address things in such a way that you recognize that there is an element of, you know, people tend to go off on fantasy tangents, or you go off the rails with, if somebody's dealing with auditory hallucinations or something like that, then it's easy to go off the rails with things like that. But I think if you have a community that fosters skeptical thinking and being able to actually discuss things openly without feeling confrontational, or, like you're being dismissive, or, creating like a you have to be on this side or this side kind of scenario, then that I feel like is much healthier than people sort of, monsters festering and growing in the darkness kind of situation.
Yeah, so it kind of gives people a bit of a mirror, almost.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
An opportunity for self-reflection and feedback, even from other
Yeah,
people.
yeah. And that very, like one of the things that I remember being like in my early days, getting involved with magic. Uh, a common thing for people to say was that, it's important to have somebody who's not into magic, who you can talk to help get grounded again. and that sort of thing. And I feel like, hey, you can have that in magic as well. You can have people who are able to help get grounded, remind you that, okay, yeah, we can kind of see things from a couple of different angles. And yeah, you want to have these results. You want to be able to go on these kinds of fantastical journeys or have these engagements with entities and things like that. But ultimately, it's like you are the one thing you can depend on. You want to be able to make sure that your temple has a firm, stable foundation, you know?
Absolutely. In terms of Thelema in the 21st century, are there aspects of Thelema that need to be reinterpreted or um, reinvigorated almost? Like, is it adapting, you know?
Hmm. I would say one of the principles of Thelema is the idea of constant change, and the idea of stasis is anathema to Thelema. That's
Nice.
thank you, thank you. um, yeah, well, I mean, I would say the danger comes in. This is actually another reason that I felt the drive to do the podcast, and I feel the drive to help spearhead a community and that sort of thing. Is that I feel that there's a lot in Thelema, in the corpus of Aleister Crowley's writings, that is very much in touch with and adaptable to the modern day, the current circumstances of things, and going forward. I think that there's a tendency to look back from the modern standpoint and say that things are different now and that sort of thing. But I think if you're able to step back outside of the modern context, you'll realize the modern context is only one little narrow slice within a long line of evolution. And there's a lot to mine out of Crowley's writings and out of the holy books, out of all the Thelemic corpus that that really does apply to different circumstances. It's not so it's easy to, like, you can definitely find things that are regrettable. There's definitely things that you can see that where Crowley's being racist, or Crowley's, um maybe such and such that he wrote about is something we can leave behind and that sort of thing. But I think the danger in that is that you're all too ready to dismiss a lot of what he's saying because of that. And there's so much that you can still get out of it. Like, I'm constantly going back, just like, the past few days, I've been going back to some of the stuff that I hadn't read in a long time. And it's like mind blowing to me how it's like, yeah, I can constantly, at every stage, even throughout all the evolution that I've gone through on my own initiatory path, like, I'm constantly able to go back and find new and deeper and adjusted perspectives on things based on these writings. So um, I would say that's a double-edged sword. I'd say it's like, the responsibility is ultimately on each of us to on how we apply these things. I think the danger is in sort of treating it like a doctrine, in the sense that well, the book of the law says this, so I don't have to put any more thought into it. I can just, act this way. And no, that's not what it's saying. You know, it's people have this idea that, well, uh, I believe in this because I'm a Thelemite, and so this is I believe in Nuit and Hadit, and I believe in the things that the Book of the Law tells me yeah, I can do and I can't do, and that sort of thing. And it's like, that's the whole idea behind the new Aeon, is getting rid of that kind of thinking, and evolving beyond it and recognizing the ways in which you engage with your reality. And ultimately, there's a responsibility in the way that you engage with your reality.
Yeah, great answer. Now, what would you say Thelema, or sorry, how do I word this? What does Thelema have to offer to the modern occultist? I guess you could say. Like, what is its greatest lesson for today?
I would say if I had to sum it up simply, I would say scientific illuminism. As much as that sounds like some kind of crazy Christian cult or something like that. um, Scientific illuminism is the idea that you're applying scientific ideas to spirituality. So the idea that you're being skeptical, that's an incredibly important aspect of Thelema, in my opinion.
Mm.
I mean, not just my opinion, but like in the basic writings throughout it. So, the idea of skepticism. So, not just buying into things. Even when you do get results, that's even more dangerous sometimes because then it makes you go off on tangents and lose control or lose perspective and that sort of thing. So, being able to rein it in and be able to question things, look at things from different angles and that sort of thing. And no, go ahead.
Yeah, the method of science, the aim of religion is generally how it's
Yeah,
worded, right?
exactly. Yeah, and I think like bringing it back to that is really handy. I think in the so like you got the equinox. You got, let's see if I can get this down without creating too much trouble. So here's volume 10 or number 10 of volume 1 of the equinox. So there's 10 of these books in it. And like throughout it, Crowley's basically building a myth, a mythology of himself as Perdurabo. And we get through the Temple of Solomon King. Excuse me, the Temple of Solomon the King is like this. It weaves through each of those books of that volume of the Equinox, and it's talking about Crowley's progress through mysticism and magic and through initiation to get where he was at that time, roughly 1909 to 1913, I want to say. Um, and so he's obviously he comes off in places as being full of himself. In other places, he does actually downplay himself or balance things out by sort of pointing out the fact that, like, okay, I recognize that, I've got hubris and that sort of thing. Either way, he ends off the Temple of Solomon the King, this sort of autobiography, with basically saying that Perdurabo is essentially a myth. It doesn't matter if this is real or not. It all comes down to doing the work. So if you're doing the work, whatever that entails for you at this time, that's the most important thing. So that I feel like ideas like that really help to bring it back to a centered place. Because I mean, why are we doing anything in the occult? Sure, it's fun to like think you can do magic to perform certain things to get certain results. It's fun to think that you can mess around with entities that you can communicate with. Um, it like ultimately the one of the great things about Thelema, I think, is being able to attain that kind of a perspective on things, a slightly non-attached perspective, where you're able to actually stand back and look at the circumstances of things. And also, I think there's a philosophy there that is a little difficult to completely codify in the sense that there's a lot of writings and that sort of thing, and it's easy to kind of get lost in the weeds with things. But there's a philosophy there that is ultimately, I think I have seen it to be very accurate as far as my engagement with reality goes. I always said, when I got into Thelema, I sort of realized at one point that I am a Thelemite, and then when I realized that, I immediately sort of came to terms with the fact that, okay, I am going to call myself a Thelemite. I am going to engage with this stuff until such point as I come to a place where it's no longer useful or meaningful or effective, or it's just I need to leave it behind and move on to something else. And I'll be mercenary about that. And I've had ups and downs, and I've had difficulties, and I've had incredible experiences, and I've had everything in between. And I've always found that it's always been, I haven't left it. It's always been there, and it's always felt like an important part of my life and an effective part of my life as well. And the ways in which I'm engaging with reality and understanding reality on my own terms, I don't just sort of like I say, it's not like just taking a doctrine and then accepting that as my way of looking at reality. It's testing things. It's actually you know doing things, experiencing things, learning to communicate with other people, and sort of understand how the mind works and that sort of thing. And if it doesn't line up with this, then obviously there's an aberration there. But it's like kind of a two-way kind of communication between these ideas. And I found for myself that it's been increasingly over time more and more effective.
Speaking of two-way communication and doing the work, do you see podcasting as a form of magical work?
Yeah, yeah, I do. I mean, this is easy territory where it's like, we could easily we could feed into it a little bit too much or whatever, but like I think my feeling is that ideas are like software. So that when you're spreading ideas, it's like spreading software, and those ideas go out in the world's like in like ripples in water, and that can have its effect. And so like if your ideas, I mean, it happens no matter what your ideas are anyway. This is just something that you can observe with the way that people work, right?
Right. Yeah.
So I mean, advertising makes fortunes off of this, um but yeah, I see ideas as being a sort of software that goes out into the world, and as a result, I think this is one of the reasons that I feel like it's nice to have podcasts for this type of thing. I mean, the degree to which it's effective and that sort of thing, it's like who knows. I feel like it's at some point when you're passionate about it, it's to me, it's more important just to do the work and let the results take care of themselves.
So you had mentioned before that you didn't want your podcast, Darkly Splendid Abodes, to be just surface level. How do you handle the tension between accessibility and depth when presenting esoteric material to like a broad audience?
Well, I don't worry about it so much. That's helpful because I I mean, the way I see it, if I'm passionate about it, and if the people that I'm talking to are passionate about the subject matter, that's first and foremost. That's the important thing, right? I think that's one of the things that I was thinking about and concerned about with the idea of, for instance, monetizing things. I mean, in the first place, one of the things with the Crowley's system, Crowley and George Cecil Jones formed the AA system as a uh, practice to for initiation and prescriptive work and that sort of thing that works for individuals and that. But one of the rules of the AA is not to accept money for spiritual teachings. Now, that doesn't necessarily apply to something like a podcast because that's not the same thing as the AA. It's not the same thing as spiritual teachings. But I feel for myself that anything regarding Thelema and spiritual stuff, I don't feel comfortable charging money for it. And so I try to avoid that like the plague as far as I'm able to. Um, for that reason, one of the things that I've considered is, well, I mean, if we did play with the idea of monetizing the podcast, if it got numbers enough to be able to do that, or even if we're not and we're trying to reach more people and we want to get bigger numbers, that has effects on your thinking and your approach to things, right? Like, I mean, if this is something I learned from observing in a temple system where the mission statement becomes, we want to have we want to get ourselves to this size in this many years. We want to be able to bring in enough people to actually get, and in different places where we can get the thing up to this size in this many years. And that kind of a mission statement for something that's supposed to be a spiritual system is in my opinion, that's poison, because you end up completely changing your mentality about why you're approaching it. You put your focus on things that are for this thing over here as opposed to what you were originally supposed to be focused on. So I see it that way, like, if I was worried about trying to focus on something in particular, then I think I would probably fall from it. So it's one of those cases of, like, I can quote the book of the law with, for pure will unassuaged to purpose, delivered from the lust of result, is every way perfect.
Yeah, I've noticed in the way that you operate that that's something that is very important to you, as well as in Toronto Thelema, as well
Mm.
as a podcast. And you've maintained your integrity in that sense through all the years that I've known you.
Yeah, thank you for validating that. It's nice to have somebody to sort of yeah, yeah, okay. It's
Yeah,
nice to have
no,
somebody to back that up. Yeah.
no, I know that that's something that's important to you, and it's very meaningful. And I've seen you stick to your guns about it through all the years that I've known you, for sure.
Yeah.
Um, Now, have there been any surprising or challenging episodes you produced for Darkly Splendid Abodes?
Surprising or challenging?
Any good
Um,
stories in general?
that's a good question, but it's I mean, like, I think, well, I guess actually one kind of interesting little anecdote is just the fact that how we had a guest, Annie Matan, who is a priestess of Jewish mysticism, and she's trying to bring back the focus on the female aspect of deity within Judaism. And the way that I met her was just kind of funny, because it was, I think it was dropping off newsletters, because we put out printed newsletters at some spots around the city, and I was bringing them to our sort of home base, Gallery 78, which unfortunately is not around anymore. But I was dropping them off there, and I ended up, like, striking up a conversation with her and stuff, and it ended up that we were surprised how much we had in common in terms of our interests, and the way in which she was speaking about her perspectives on Judaism just seemed so in line with a lot of Thelemic ideas. Um, and she ended up, like, talking about, like, Lilith, and the idea that Lilith was demonized, but Lilith was actually, if you look at it with clear eyes, Lilith was a symbol of power, female power, and somebody who wasn't just going to be dominated or accept a lesser role than she deserved.
Right.
And that was like, that was a really cool kind of thing to bring into things, because I mean, Lilith, I feel like, has some degree of place within Thelema. It's not as big as it might otherwise be, and I feel like Crowley's engagement with Lilith was seeing her from that lens of, like, the negative sorts of presentations and that sort of thing. But
Ah,
that that ended up resulting in, I mean, he named one of his daughters, one of the many names she had was Lilith, but she had many names, and he said that some tasteless man had claimed that she had died because she died young, and she had died of over, I forget the exact word he used, but basically overnamedness, pretty much overnomialism or something like that. So it's a little bit of a
Oh, wow.
tasteless joke, but yeah. But I mean, so Crowley had some kind of engagement with some kind of interactions with Lilith, but because of that, having her on the podcast and being able to have this discussion with her on the subject of Lilith to some extent, kind of led me to this whole different perspective on Lilith, because I ended up realizing, okay, you know what? The Enochian stuff, as it came to John Dee and Edward Kelly, has this really strong female and sexual kind of energy coming through on it, and through the reception of the vision and the voice, Liber 418, the places in which Lilith appears, there's places in which she appears very threateningly and that sort of thing, but it does hint at this negative perspective on her being transmuted or cleared away to reveal the actual Lilith that is not clouded by this lens. And so it started making me think that maybe there's something to that. Maybe the Enochian stuff is actually Lilith trying to reassert herself and find a basically get rid of all this old baggage, you know? And the funny thing being that the first Aether is titled Lil, which is part of Lilith and doesn't have the last letter Tav, which is of Earth and Saturn.
Oh, okay.
So
Very interesting. I never heard that connection before. But it's funny
yeah.
that you brought up Annie Matan and Lilith, because that was something that I wanted to dig into a bit in our conversation today.
Oh, cool.
Because Lilith is a very popular figure in the Luciferian community.
Uh-huh.
And I wanted to know a little bit more about Lilith's place within Thelema. And I knew that it wasn't a very big role, that it didn't come up all that much. But I knew that you had talked with Annie Matan about this, and I was wondering if you had any further perspectives on that. And yeah, if we could dig a little bit more into that, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, like I say, there's not that much. There's from what I was what I was putting together for that talk, and what I can think of right now, I can only really think of that location in the vision and the voice where Lilith appears, and it's like it's in the I want to say the third Aether, where Crowley's basically having the vision and being overwhelmed. It's pretty much like when you get to this point, the Aethers go from the 30th Aether, which is the closest to the material world, and then they work their way out as concentric spheres, or, different people have conceptualized them differently. But essentially, they work their way from the 30th Aether to the first Aether, and the first Aether is the most rarefied. And so when you get down to those smaller number Aethers, like the higher ones in the sense of more refined, or however you want to parse it, they are harder for apparently to, get anything out of, because they're so difficult to reach. In fact, in the vision of the voice, it's told to Crowley that at one point that the beyond a certain point, the Aethers will lie and send you on completely wrong tangents, unless you're a master of the temple, unless you've had such and such spiritual experiences or reached a certain particular point. And I think the real reason being that you need to be able to be freed of some of the workings of the mind that kind of prevent you from being able to have the proper experience without being filtered and problematically um, blocked or fucked with by your own mental faculties, something along those lines. But basically, the idea being that you need to reach a certain stage of progress in order to access these higher aethers. And to even get anything out of them at all, I think Crowley was really going past his ability to get anything, quite frankly. He was saying. So he was seeing the and it, more than just seeing it this way, but it was very clear that his scrying of the aethers was it constituted his progress, his initiation to the Master of the Temple grade, and that's going into the supernal triads. That's going beyond the mind and reason and into something in the archetypal world, into this thing beyond what we deal with in normal consciousness. So yeah, when you get to that point with the third aether, as I believe it is, he there was a lot of very dissonant, difficult imagery that was coming up, and one of them being this Lilith being this hideous thing, reeking and I won't go into some of the details of the description just in case. I don't know what you prefer for your language on the podcast, but yeah, it's like it was basically his response to this thing clawing at him was kill me, kill me. So
Wow. Okay.
it was rough. So but in the end, she's transmuted into these beautiful women who he's associating with like mental images of women he knows. And maybe even later on when he's making his commentary on the Vision of the Voice, he's speculating by the descriptions of them that maybe they represented scarlet women to come. So women that he would be doing magical workings with in the future beyond that time. But I mean, there's still this transmutation there, and there's a transmutation, I believe, as well in the following aether, the second aether. There's some stuff with a vesica that's above a pyramid, and we have some strong, phallus and Katice kind of imagery going on with these things, and it's followed by some reference again to I think Lilith. Going off the top of my head, but it's like I really kind of feel like there's a lot of this energy of like Crowley's association based on all the things that he's read and learned and maybe experienced firsthand based on workings or meditations with Lilith, with these energies that have been associated with her ever since, going back into the depths of our history. But I get that sense she's seeking transmutation. She appears again in Liber 65. I memorized the chapter 3, which I've talked about in my podcast. I've memorized chapter 3 for my my grade work, and she appears in that initially as a representation of sort of desire in the lower sense, I think. So that it's like he says, "Yea, Than, yea, Thili, yea, Lilith," and they're all kind of involving the Hebrew letter Lamed, which is L, and Tav, which is T. It's like basically seeing those two letters, and particularly the T, being kind of like related to earthiness and that sort of thing. So it's like desires being drawn into earthiness. And if you picture, I don't want to go on too much of a tangent. I apologize if this is too much, but I'm not sure how your audience is with the Tree of Life. So apologies if this goes on a tangent, but this is why skepticism is handy. Netzach is desire. So that's the 7th sphere on the 10-sphere Tree of Life. And I feel like, so like when we have that desire,
The one connected with Venus.
exactly, yeah. And so, and we can picture that as being desire that can tend back down into the unconscious, the subconscious, into the earthiness, into the kind of, you know, addictions, negative kind of manifestations of desire, things that you can picture in some Eastern contexts as like hungry ghosts would be kind of like attached to desires. Um, I think through the path of initiation, the goal by the time you get to Netzach is that you start directing that desire as aspiration towards, in our system, in the Thelemic system, the holy guardian angel, which has different connotations.
Right. So that goes, the next one would be the sphere of the sun,
Mm,
Tiferet, right?
yeah,
And that's where you have that knowledge and conversation with the
yeah.
holy guardian angel. Now, a lot of the people in the Luciferian community work with the Qliphoth
Mm-hmm.
and are a bit more familiar with the tree from that perspective.
Gotcha.
But yeah, I think that a lot of people in the Luciferian community are pretty familiar with that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it really interesting that Crowley seemed to have a lot of problems or a lot of challenges, let's say, with the Lilith figure, especially considering the connection to Babylon, which is kind of a
Yeah.
similar figure, right? It's a liberated woman,
Yeah.
archetype, archetypal liberated woman. And so he kind of works with a very similar type of energy with Babylon, yet seems to have a lot of challenges with Lilith.
Yeah, I think I mean if we're honest with ourselves, you talk about the Qliphoth, we could think of the Qliphoth in one respect as being stuff we can do shadow work with, where it's like we have our sort of associations with things that we've come up with. We all have a context in which we were born. So, like, you may have been born into a family that has a particular religion, or is specifically secular, or whatever the context is. There, you have cultural context. You have your personal experiences, maybe going back before you were born, but if you just concentrate on birth forward, there's like going to be, whatever traumas you're going through and that sort of thing. And if we're honest with ourselves, you can't just decide not to have to deal with that anymore. I mean, I've been working on myself and working through initiation for years, but it's like I'm still sort of engaging with things. I just memorized the second chapter of the Book of the Law, and it's like it took a while for it to really click with me, because I found that the more I was memorizing it, the more it was getting beneath the surface. It was bumping up against old things, old forms that I hadn't resolved yet. And it was causing sort of superstitious things to come up and be like, oh, be careful of this, be careful of that. And then I realized, okay, this is stuff I still need to work through and process and refocus, you know? So I think for Crowley, I think that's one perspective we can take on it, is that, like, as much as he's, working with Babylon, he's not, he still has his baggage. He still very much has his baggage. As he said, he was still born in the previous aeon. He was still a child of the old aeon. So I think there's an aspect of that as well, where you're inevitably going to be confronting these things or repressing them. So
And so, getting into the work that you were talking about, that you were working through, if I remember correctly, the second chapter of the Book of the Law is more focused on the Osiris and the Osirian mysteries and the Aeon of Osiris. Is that right?
Well, I mean, I guess you could take it that way. You can interpret it in a few different ways, but I would have.
Which would connect with Christianity as well, too, right? Because of the whole dying and resurrecting God.
I know what you
connection.
mean. I know what you mean, but it's, and I guess, like I say, it's like it'd be interesting to look at it in that light. I never really thought of it that way. It makes sense because we have three chapters. We could attribute them to the Aeon of Isis for Nuit, the Aeon of Osiris for Hadit, and then the Aeon of Horus for Rahu or Kuit. Makes total sense. However, I feel that my difficulties with dealing with Hadit, maybe that is why. Now that you mention it, that might be kind of an interesting thing for me to consider and meditate upon. But yeah, there's a lot of things in the second chapter that are potentially unpleasant for a lot of people these days. So like just lines like "the slaves shall serve," "compassion is the vice of kings," "stamp down the wretched and the weak," "this is the law of the strong," "this is our law and the joy of the world." Those kinds of lines are, pretty difficult for a lot of us. Maybe not for all of us. Maybe there's some jerks out there who
There
don't have a
definitely
problem with
are.
that, but that's still difficult for me in a lot of ways. Um, and I'm not one to just sort of sweep it under the rug by saying, well, you can interpret it as like this mystical thing, and it's just the slaves are the mental faculties that you put into service to, yada yada yada. No, it's like, you can, maybe there's an interpretation like that, but there's a lot of these things might mean things you don't like. And this is part and parcel of, I think, the work of dealing with these things. If that's one of the make or break deals, then I might have to confront that. B, it's like, maybe it's right. Maybe it's just saying what's true, and I have to accept that. C, maybe it's not so simple as that. Maybe it goes back to what I was saying about the fact that there's constant change. This isn't a stasis thing. So there's an evolution that's constantly being undergone. So I don't have any easy answers for it, and I think that's kind of the point. I don't think there's supposed to be easy answers for it. But yeah, in the case of chapter 2, there's certain things that are, it was the same for Crowley. Crowley received the Book of the Law. He describes it as being a period of his life where he was just kind of nihilistic. He was really heavy into the Buddhism perspective and the vision of universal sorrow. And he was evoking sylphs in the Great Pyramid, in the King's Chamber of the Great Pyramid, to show his wife Rose. Not because he was excited about it, not because it was magical and mystical, but because he was basically saying, there it is. What difference does it make? It doesn't amount to anything. All of these magical powers and things, don't really mean much of anything. So he was in this kind of a state of mind when he was receiving the Book of the Law. And there's even a point in chapter 2 where he's sort of fighting, and he doesn't like it. And verse 9 is like, remember all ye that existence is pure joy, that all the sorrows are but as shadows. They pass and are done. But there is that which remains. And then immediately the next verse is addressing the fact, "O prophet, I see thee hate the hand and the pen." But basically, I am stronger, and it's like, so Crowley's like resisting this because it's very much against he's having just a reaction against it, but it's like got control over him. It's stronger than he is. And he says, because Hadit is the core of every star. It's the thing at the center of each of us, deeper than all of the layers that constitute our personality, that we take for ourselves. We take that part of ourselves, our person, like everything we've experienced, all of our reactions and thoughts and emotions and all these things we take for ourselves. A lot of the time we just take that intellectual thing that kind of judges things and wants to understand things before we try something new. We take that for ourselves. That's not true either. All of it's kind of like just tools at our disposal, and there's that star working through all of that.
And how does that relate to the saying within Thelema that every man and every woman is a star?
That's a good question. I mean, that's a pretty binary statement as well. So that's another one of those things that you could argue maybe that needs updating and that sort of thing for modern context. But yeah, the idea is every man and every woman is a star. I mean, I want to emphasize that I'm not going to define that for anyone. I think it's Crowley added a comment at the end of the Book of the Law where it's saying that those who discuss the contents of this book should be shunned as centers of pestilence. It's best if you burn this copy on the first reading, and
Which
so
is
forth.
great for marketing, like
Yeah. Yeah.
or
Not
for
only
book
does it,
sales, yeah.
yeah, it's not only lurid enough that it's going to make everybody want to read it, but it's like it's also if people do follow through and burn it, then they're just going to end up buying new copies later.
Right.
But I
Okay,
think
well, moving past the star thing, um, I know that Lucifer comes up in some of Crowley's writings here and there, and I think that that would be something that viewers of this channel would be interested in hearing about, and the the context and also I know that it's been said, and I can't remember where I heard this, but it's been said by some that Crowley's own personal holy guardian angel, Iwas, what is Lucifer. I've heard that before too. And so just like, can you tell us a bit about Lucifer's role within Thelema?
well, I would say I mean, I'm not as far as literally Lucifer as a term and as an entity and that sort of thing. I can't really speak to it per se in an academic sense. But the first thing that comes to mind is that I can tie it to every man and every woman is a star. And the main reason I wanted to bring up the comment, which sort of prohibits discussion about it, is that I think the importance of that comment is the fact that it's like, okay, remember that everybody has their interpretation engagement with the Book of the Law and its contents. And it is advisable to read Crowley's commentary on the subject because he actually has really excellent insights into it. And it's easy to go off the rails with anything spiritually. But either way, if we want to sort of think about like my sort of way of seeing this, if we think about Lucifer as Prometheus being related to the idea of Prometheus, we can see, as I was saying, like we sort of think, if I think of myself as being these layers of what I might call my personality, and that might include, the world around me. It might extend out into the world around me. Um, if I consider that all kind of layers of myself, and the star is that thing at the very core of myself, which is Hadit, um, then I can sort of liken myself through spiritual attainment and sort of the calibration of my being to allow the flowing of that star to come through, then I can sort of see myself as being a reed, like that reed that Prometheus brought fire from the gods to humanity, so that that star shining through is the fire of the gods. So that's kind of like how I might relate. That's the first thing that comes to my mind on the subject.
Yeah, and I definitely connect Lucifer with Prometheus. I think that Prometheus is a light bearer, which is
Mm,
literally the meaning of the word Lucifer.
yeah.
But there's also the Hymn of Lucifer is a piece of
Mm.
writing that Crowley did. What does that tell us about Crowley's thoughts on Lucifer?
Well, unfortunately, I hadn't read that just before talking, so I don't have it clear in my mind. I can't remember even if I've read it or not, to be honest with you. So, like, I don't want to. I certainly don't want to speak uh, to it at all at the moment unless I get a chance to read it. But have you read it recently? Can you tell us about it?
I have read it more than once, but not recently.
Mm.
Not to the point where I would be able to kind of talk about it. I was hoping that you were
Yeah.
more familiar with it because yeah, I don't engage with a ton of Thelemic material these days.
Yeah, yeah.
It's more stuff that I had engaged with in the past.
Well, you know what? The difficulty when it comes to thelemic material, like, I mean, people ask me where should they start, and it's like, just jump in and because the
Mm.
problem is there's so damn much. Crowley was insanely prolific. Like the amount of things that he wrote was just, overwhelming. I mean, I'm just sort of revisiting the Laws for All, and it's been a number of years. This is Crowley's commentary to the Book of the Law. I don't think it's all of his commentaries on the Book of the Law, but it's been so long since I read that, and I've been reading Crowley. I haven't stopped reading Crowley over the years or anything like that. So it's like, you know, I read Diary of a Drug Fiend years and years ago, but I'm just starting back into it again because it's been so long. So there's just so much. It's hard to
Yeah.
like speak authoritatively on everything. So, but
Had you heard that idea or that connection between Iwas and Lucifer before?
I had not. But I mean, it's not a terrible suggestion, although it's difficult to say because I think Crowley himself like had differing opinions at different stages of his life. He had
Hmm.
he had thoughts that Iwas might actually be a living person in the world who was probably maybe astrally projecting when he was reciting the Book of the Law to Crowley,
Oh
as
wow,
Crowley was
okay.
describing it. But and then there's other places like Crowley's speculating on if Iwas is his own guardian angel. I think he came to think so at a point in his life, and then from there on in, he kind of assumed that Iwas was um, his holy guardian angel. But like I say, there's different ways in which he speculated on the subject, and I think that's one of the most important things. Is like, yeah, it's kind of in speculating on it, throwing ideas around, exploring different possibilities, but not really being too worried about getting the right answer necessarily. It's nice to always have that kind of like being able to stand back and say, you know, maybe we don't have it down, maybe we don't have it right. But
Mhm.
I do think that's like, even if it is the Holy Guardian Angel, maybe the Holy Guardian Angel could be thought of as Lucifer, you know?
And just to clarify, within the context of Thelema, what is the Holy Guardian Angel? Is it part of you? Is it a separate thing that's connected to you?
Yes. Um, this is the
Oh,
difficulty with
that
that.
clears it up.
Yeah, exactly. Well, Crowley famously said that the term guard, like he chose to use the term holy guardian angel because it was a term so patently ridiculous no one would take it seriously and formulate religious doctrine based on it. Um, he underestimated people, but yeah. It's that's the difficulty of that subject as well. Is again, it's basically speculative until you actually experience it yourself. I think that's maybe the safest way I can answer that. It's like everybody's own personal engagement with the Holy Guardian Angel is personal. And if you tried to say it is this, the Holy Guardian Angel is exactly this, and this is the kind of thing you're going to experience as you get closer to it and experience union with it and that sort of thing. The problem is it's not necessarily going to be that for everybody, and you can't necessarily guess what it's going to be for any given person. So I think there's like an important um, conceptualization of it in Thelema that it's important that you have your personal engagement with the Holy Guardian Angel for that reason. So, but there are ways in which people talk about it as if it's the higher self or the inner self, or a separate being that might even be alive in the world today. There's ways in which that these ideas have been tossed about. There's a place in the where was this? I think this is actually in that last installment of the Temple of Solomon the King. Um, I think, but I think it was this idea that the 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 master of the temple then goes on to be a holy guardian angel for someone. So there's a way in
Oh,
which
okay.
that might be a conceptualization as well, which is kind of a whole interesting thing, because it's like, I mean, when you're reading Crowley, one of the things you run into is like he's constantly referring to apparently discrete people, like other people, Perturabo, VVVVV, Master Therian, Aleister Crowley the Man, this, that, and the other. He's referring to these apparently different people, and then you start getting the idea, okay, this is all Crowley just under these different pseudonyms. And they're his aspiration names at different stages of initiation. But it seems to be that you have the person who is the man of Earth, who's living in normal life, like we're discussing this subject right here in front of each other, and then you have the lover, who is the adept. So that's when you reach that Tifereth, the sun that we were talking about. That's when you, in the Thelemic system, that's ideally where you're attaining the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. So you're getting in more, you're becoming more you, more, more of that light is coming through, or whatever, however you want to parse that for yourself. You're essentially more balanced and all that sort of thing. But that's the adept stage. And so when you're at that adept stage, that is like its own sort of entity that's operating on its own level, simultaneous to the fact that you're existing in the world. And then when you go beyond the abyss and become a master of the temple, you're giving up all of the attainments that you've reached at that point. And then that is in the inner order. And that's kind of like another. So we have, like, for Crowley, that was VVVVV is existing on that level. And then we have his adept self. And then we have his man of earth self, who's the scribe, for instance, taking down notes in Liber 65. So we can kind of think of those things all operating at the same time. I think the analogy I was using recently on the podcast was, I teach guitar. So I find, like, one of my favorite things is to identify for students the fact that you have a separation between muscle memory and the way that your brain works. So your brain's getting frustrated because your fingers won't do what it wants them to do, because your brain knows what you want to do, and then your fingers just don't do it. So yeah, you have to like
I
train
felt that
them.
before. It's
Yeah.
like playing drums.
Yeah. And so you have to train them on their own terms. They have their own consciousness. Then you can free up this part of your brain so that that can just be focused on other things, and it can just automatically use the muscle memory and just work on its own plane. So it's like that whole idea, the adjunct of don't mix the planes. In that sense, it's kind of like, well, don't let your brain micromanage, because it's going to do a worse job of micromanaging than your fingers would do on their own. So
That concept of becoming a holy guardian angel when you've crossed the abyss and become a Magister Templi kind of reminds me of the journey of Enoch, and that Enoch eventually becomes the Archangel Metatron.
yeah. We have a few people throughout history who were said to have been translated.
Right.
So, like, they didn't die; they just went up, or over, or whatever. So yeah, we have that. One of which was Romulus, the Roman founder.
Okay.
Yeah, not biblical at all.
Right.
Far from it. But yeah, turns out
This
the
is connected to the idea of the ascended masters, right?
yeah. So yeah, which is interesting stuff. It's like um and it's questionable as well. Like, I mean, who knows? Like, we could speculate on this quite a bit. Like, maybe VVVVV. It seems there's a way that VVVVV already existed. It's not just a matter of like,
Mm,
you know, Crowley created this. I think there's a way you could picture it being sort of like the Egyptian concept, the ancient Egyptian concept of creating light bodies, you know, or doubles, or however you want to parse that, so that
right.
you know, you have the Ba and the Ka, or whatever the names of those different bodies are. And I think an idea being that you can continue to exist in the afterlife by creating this extra body. So there's a way in which you can visualize initiation being like that, like you're creating these new sort of bodies. But there's a way in which that VVVVV seems to have been, like in Liber Portalucas, he seems to be attracted to the earth. So coming to the earth in order to bring a message to the earth, to bring sort of like a new kind of way of thought and practice. So
Well, that makes sense to me as well because it's like at that point, um, it's not bound by time and space in the same way as
yeah,
we think of it here. You know, living in the third dimension and experiencing linear time. You know that it could be like a fourth or fifth dimensional being where that doesn't that linear time doesn't make sense anymore or
yeah,
doesn't come into play in the same way as we think of it.
yeah, which is literally how above the abyss is described. It's like it's
Right.
beyond time, it's beyond space, it's beyond the normal conceptions of the mind. Yeah. So
Now, let's get into the idea of contact with non-human intelligence or interdimensional beings and that sort of thing.
mm,
Like you always, like for example, you always see people in the UFO and UAP community bringing up that drawing that Crowley
yeah,
did of Lamb,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Which they say has a lot of hallmarks of what later ended up becoming known as the Greys, you know, the
Hmm.
stereotypical extraterrestrial being or alien.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think like my opinion, I'm kind of a wet blanket in a lot of ways, but that's like I'm pretty hardcore attached to the skepticism sort of thing. Just briefly, like back in the 90s, I was really big into like the idea of aliens and you know, ghosts, and the end of the world coming in the year 2000. That was a big thing. And you know, all that kind of stuff, but and conspiracy theories. But I think after the year 2000 didn't pan out, I was like, wait a second. And I became a little bit more skeptical of things.
But what about 2012?
Yeah. Okay. Well, they were right. What can I say?
I,
They paid
I
good money
have a
for those
connection with
billboards.
that. I feel that that was a significant. There's a significance there to me that I feel meaningful personally, but to
Mm.
2012. But yeah, I know what you're saying.
Well, you know what? Like, I mean, this actually that maybe feeds into what I'm going to say as well. Is that as much as I have a skeptical aspect to like my way of thinking, I just want to give that background to it. I part of the reason I have a skeptical, I'm so hardcore skeptical, is to counter my desire. You know, I'm like Mulder and Scully in one kind of thing. You know, so I want to
Right. Like
believe.
you want to believe, but at the same time, you don't want to deceive yourself.
Yeah, not only that, but I'm very hyper conscious of how ready I am to deceive myself. And
Right.
that's one of those things that I like to talk about a lot is like I try to be honest about that because I think a lot more people deceive themselves or you know, have similar kinds of experiences with things, then actually will be feel comfortable, you know, talking about openly and that sort of thing. So I feel like, okay, well, if we can address that, you know, I think that when I first read the Book of the Law, and there's this maybe not when I first read it, but when I was getting into Thelema and stuff, there's this idea of the magical child that's foretold. And before I found out about Frater Ahad and that, there was part of me kind of like fantasizing about being that magical child, you know? And I think that's a natural thing that clearly happens to people. People get same thing with the idea of the end of the
Right.
world coming. People get off on this. They get attracted to this, they get obsessed with it, they get enthralled by it. This is a human thing. And if we can't talk about it openly without shaming each other about it, then we're not going to make progress with that, you know? So, but I do think it's important to recognize that it is a human thing and it's not necessarily right, you know? Like, it may be mistaken. It may be a desire. It may be a wish fulfillment fantasy or whatever the, psychological term is. Basically, we got to be careful not to fall into traps. Maybe something is actually something we want to go for, but we want to be careful that we're not just falling for a trap or something like that, like even a self-made trap. Okay, back to the subject at hand.
Yeah.
So Lamb. So my thought is basically like I'm pretty skeptical of Lamb being anything other than Crowley's stylized self-portrait, because it's specifically being used in the Equinox 3 number 1. I second guessed myself there for a second, but because it's being used as a frontispiece for I love being able to say that word, for the beginning of now I can't think of the name. It's The Voice in the Silence, I want to say, by Madame Blavatsky. And so Crowley was commenting on her book, and so it's sort of like the it's being used in that context, and so she's writing about these theosophical ideas. She had famously claimed to have been allowed to learn from these Tibetan monks at a time when access to those Tibetan monks was just hadn't happened yet. So there was still this mysterious kind of thing. And so this image of Lamb was drawn as a self-portrait of Crowley as this ascended master, and Lamb having its connotations, its meaning, and its enumeration. I think it's 72 just off the top of my head. Maybe it's 71 because there's no reason there would be two. Yeah, so, so 72, 71, and that has its correspondences as well. So my my skeptical assumption is that people are getting excited and enthusiastic about these connections that they can make, and sort of generating this really exciting mystery around it that they can connect up with cause and effect, and these things going on that are really exciting and really fun. Now, that sounds a little bit dismissive of the whole idea, and it is, but it's like there's another aspect to it. There's the aspect that I mean, somebody had commented. I think I posted your episode, like the episode we did together on Darkly Splendid Abodes, and somebody had commented asking, "How can Lucifer be a spirit when an actual spirit when it was just something related to the king of Babylon and being referred to him?" And I usually don't bother with those kinds of things because those kinds of comments tend to be like, this is before the episode come out as well, so usually if it's just commenting on the headline, I don't bother with it because it's like, okay, you haven't listened to the thing yet, so maybe the listening to it would answer your question. So you're not really asking a question, you're just making a snarky comment, and I don't care. That being said, that being said, the idea of Lucifer being a spirit, well, one of the really interesting things from Ram, who used to do talks, like he was the guy who I originally got the talks going with for Toronto Thelema. He was the one doing the talks and stuff. One of the really fascinating things that
Ryan, you said?
yeah,
Yeah, Ryan.
he turned me on to this idea of looking at things this way. All gods exist. Uh, and I think at the time he was doing a talk at his place, and he was sort of talking about like these different gods and god forms and stuff. And he was saying like, if you're, going through this spirit journey, or if you're going through this working that you're doing, you can always call on him. And he points up to this crucifix up above him. And I was like, interesting. So like, even like, I was just under the assumption that like Thelemites are gonna hate Jesus. And or just have an aversion there and that sort of thing. But then it kind of changed my perspective on it. And like, basically what I'm getting at here is that the gods, all of these things, including they basically, we create projections, we create astral forms. These things do take on forms. So like, Lucifer does take on a form. The more that people are continuously projecting upon this idea, it takes its own form. It has its own discrete existence out there somewhere, and you can interact with it and communicate with it and that sort of thing. It happens to people as well. Like, people project on people. You get this is where you get a lot of the problems with famous people, right? Because it's like the projections are creating a god form.
The man, the myth, the legend.
Exactly. Yeah.
Three separate things, right?
So, I mean, there's that aspect of it, is like, it's doing something. Like, a lot of these, like the ideas that people have about Lamb, and the ideas that have generated from that. Same thing with like H.P. Lovecraft. I mean, like, you look at the Cthulhu mythos and all these things, the Necronomicon, and these things take on lives of their own to some extent.
Absolutely. And that was something I wasn't sure if we were going to get to or not, but it was something that I was hoping that we would get to. But getting just before we move on from the Lucifer thing, I just wanted to point out that Lucifer pre-exists that reference in Isaiah. That the Lucifer, that only came about through a translation into the Latin, because it wasn't written in Latin, right? And Lucifer is a Latin word, but the Romans used the word Lucifer to refer to the morning star, the phenomenon of the morning star. Yeah. The last bright object the last celestial object aside from the moon that you could see just before the sun rose. It was like the last star-like object kind of holding out, resisting almost. So that's predating the connection with the reference in Isaiah. And a lot of people don't know this, but that word Lucifer is found multiple times in the Latin Vulgate edition of the Bible, which was the main Latin version, where it was translated into the Latin, but none of those books were ever written in Latin. So Lucifer wasn't originally part of the Bible to begin with, because it wasn't written in Latin.
Yeah, I mean, talk about things taking on lives of their own. Like, if you sort of trace the linguistic changes from the original Hebrew of the Torah as it's going through these translations, even by that point, it's already gone through, passing from scribe to scribe, so it's like, which version is being translated in the first place? And then the way that has transmitted through the Middle Ages, into the Renaissance and into the present day, it's like, it undergoes all these changes, so that, who knows, like, how certain ideas are nuanced throughout that whole period. You might have concepts that no longer bear any resemblance to what they originally did.
Absolutely. And just to kind of close up the idea of the entities, interacting with entities, does that play a role in Thelema?
Yeah. I think this is one of the questions that I'm asking myself constantly, to be honest with you, is like, yeah, what is, because obviously people think of Thelema, they usually think of, well, you have magic and you have mysticism, you have yoga and you have ceremonial ritual. And I always ask myself, what is this, interaction with spirits and that sort of thing? Because it almost feels like I guess the other thing is with Thelema is that it's very much about initiation. And what is initiation? It is changing yourself, undergoing changes. Essentially, you can sort of conceptualize it as being an alchemy of the self, and working towards accomplishing the great work, as it's put, in order to do whatever that is. And that again tends to be a little bit vague because at the outset, you don't really know what the great work is. You don't have a clear idea of that. So it's better just to move forward, do whatever it is you're doing to move forward, because otherwise, if will stops and cries why, invoking because, then will stops and does not. If power asks why, then is power weakness. So it's better just to be doing stuff. But yeah, it's like, what is the purpose of that? Does it actually pertain to initiation? Can you do initiation without that? Can you do Thelema without initiation? It's an interesting questions that I don't really have necessarily a really great answer for, except that that does seem to be part and parcel of Thelema. It does seem to be a big part of it, interacting with spirits and in different ways, depending on what's going on. I find that like the biggest ways that tend to come up are the Goetia and Enochian. Enochian is really handy because it helps with initiation. It's kind of like working, with the angels, communicating with the angels of the Enochian system, and that tends to work towards initiation. And their concerns are of the overall world. Goetia tends to be more associated with the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel. So, in that, as a part of that process of attaining the knowledge and conversation of the Holy Guardian Angel, at some point, you evoke each of the demons in turn in order to put them in service, to put them all kind of working towards the same goal. There again, that term service doesn't sound very good. And a lot of people there are a lot of people who feel like the demons are their friends, that they're like, they shouldn't be treated with disrespect and that sort of thing. And that's fair. I mean, this is just talking about this in terms of the traditional medieval grimoires, but my interpretation of it is putting them in service in the sense that everything is directed towards the same thing. Again, that Netzach idea of directing it to the sun as opposed to willy-nilly in all different directions. So one of the easiest analogies for that is sort of like all the different aspects of your mind. Like you have your thoughts kind of roaming free. You have reactions to things. You have like emotional things going on. If you can, by your practices, focus all that in one direction, then you can get a lot more work done.
I really resonate with that answer because the way that I practice Luciferianism, I do work with entities here and there, but the core of my work is more about alchemy and energy work and shadow work, where it's basically working on developing myself and achieving wholeness, you could say, and that sort of thing. But work, interacting with entities does play a role, although I wouldn't say it's a central role for me personally, and for everybody it's different.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I wanted to mention is that when you mentioned the Goetia, it seems like you're coming at the Goetia from the perspective of the Abramelin operation, or the book of the holy magic of Abramelin the Mage. And is that
Hmm.
where the term the holy guardian angel comes from in Thelema?
Yeah, I think it's originally from the Book of Albermel and the Mage, and I think basically the thing is I'm in the same boat as you, where it's I tend to be I have done a lot of Enochian stuff, so I'm working with angels and doing that stuff, but I haven't done Goetia so much, and it's like I might end up doing it when it's the right time. But something I find interesting is that it seems like there's, you see certain types of people who have certain types of approaches or assumptions about what they're going after. There's you and I seem to be going after the same thing. We're approaching this with the same idea. It's like self betterment. We have this kind of trajectory that we seem to be focused on. And so for us, it seems like that's just the most sensible. It just makes sense, right? Like, why would you be doing this otherwise? But so many people I've talked to are coming from completely different angles. And I prefer just not to speak to that because I feel like they can speak to it because they're a hadith over there experiencing things from that angle and I can learn from it. So in that case, it's like, people who are doing Goetia or they're doing whatever other kinds of work that they're engaging with these demonic entities or whatever other entities that they are dealing with. Um, yeah, it's just a different approach. It's like some people do it just to get things, you know.
Right. And to me, that's the Goetia without the perspective of the Abramelin.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
just Goetia, is
yeah,
just calling up these entities in order to try and get something from
yeah,
them, whether that be knowledge or manifestation of certain desires and that sort of thing. Whereas if you come at it from the perspective of Abramelin, then you're doing it to try and bring these things um, into order, you could say,
yeah,
order ab ko, and
yeah,
ultimately to connect with that um, guardian angel, is what it's termed in the Abramelin um, grimoire.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, there's a temptation to sort of create an either or situation there, where it's like, because that, like I say, it's I think you and I are on the same page with that. Like we're looking at it from that perspective, and it feels like dealing with just the Goetia without that purpose to it, to put it to. Like for instance, dealing with the Goetia for I remember somebody else asking Ryan back in the day why he would do, because he was talking about Goetia and doing magical rituals, and he's like, this person was asking, why are you doing this? And he's like, any reason you want. You want to get a book, you can have the, talk to the right demon and have them sort of help to channel it your way. If you want, such and such, this, that, or the other. And it's like, but there's this mental aberration where he to him, it's like obvious why you would do that. To myself and this other person, it's kind of like, I can't, for some reason, it just doesn't like that. I'm not going to do that. It's like, it's not really of interest to, it doesn't make any sense to do that. It's like, if I want this book, I'll just use the material realm that I'm in. But so it's this weird mental aberration for me where it's like, to me, I'm interested in initiation, what that represents, that development, that working towards um, basically balancing myself so that I can then also provide something for the rest of the world. Like I know that's a little bit altruistic and a little bit whatever, but I want to see the world benefit in ways that I can envision. I would like to see people not being a slave to their superstitious sorts of attitudes about things and that sort of thing. I'd like to see changes for the better. I'd like to see humans understanding the way that the mind works better and not, not just bumbling around in the dark constantly. I'd like to see progress,
Absolutely. Yeah, and you and I agree on that. And I also hear people talking about Luciferianism as being a very selfish or, worshiping the self. You hear all the time, and calling it a left-hand path, which most people agree that it is a left-hand path. But one thing that separates it, and we've talked about this a little bit from other left-hand paths, is that altruistic drive to try and make the world a better place through the bringing of knowledge. That like basically exactly what you were saying, that you want to try and you want to see people being able to understand things better and making informed decisions about their life and not being tied to or manipulated by their ignorance or by being exploited and things like that. So I definitely really resonate with what you said there about that. And I do think that there is an element of altruism within Luciferianism, and what you were saying, that it's within Thelema as you see it as well.
Yeah, and I think this is where it's important. Like a lot of the ways in which Crowley talks about Christianity, for instance, is that the problems that come from some of these altruistic ideas uh, are, it's like we're all humans, we're all dealing with similar kind of machinery and that sort of thing. Um, it's like I do want to see the world a better place. There's a bit of a selfishness to that, because I think the world
Yeah.
is kind of like I want it to be better the way that I envision it to some extent, but like I also see the world as an extension of myself. So, so there is a certain degree in which I'm thinking selfishly in that sense, and I think that the way in which a lot of the traditional quote unquote cultural values and ethics and that sort of thing are operating from a knee-jerk reaction place that's got a lot of these ideas built into it that are very destructive ultimately, even though it's like the road to hell is paved with good intentions kind of thing, like people doing good things um, because they think they're doing good things, but really it makes you feel empowered. So like I think being able to understand how you work is actually going to be really helpful for that as well, being able to like recognizing. I think people downplay Nietzsche too quickly. I think there's a lot like it's obviously like you can read Nietzsche and just sort of be like an adolescent male and just see it as an empowerment thing and start running with all these transgressive ideas and stuff. But it's like I think Nietzsche actually was pretty on the money with a lot of things. One of which is that will to power is kind of a thing.
Yeah. I
And a
was
lot
just
of
talking about this with somebody recently.
oh, is that right? Yeah. I think like, a lot of the things, the drives that we have, the reactions that we have, a lot of the emotions that we have, a lot of the ways in which we interact with other people seem like we're doing it for certain reasons, but ultimately you can actually read it as will to power. If you don't physically
Yeah.
have power to overcome somebody and assert your authority, then you find other means. And, that can be any number of things.
That is a great counterpoint, or not exactly a counterpoint, but an elaboration of
Mm.
that idea of the altruistic aspect. Now, there's one more thing, if you have the energy or the spoons, that I'd
Yeah,
like to
yeah.
pick your brain about before we wrap this up, but is the connection between the Cthulhu mythos and Thelema, or any overlap there? Because I know that Kenneth Grant was really into it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
if you could speak on your knowledge, if you have any, about that connection.
I don't really, I tried to read Kenneth Grant and kind of got impatient with it. I've got to return to it and see if I can, get into it a little bit more. But so I can't really speak to Kenneth Grant per se, but I do feel like I found it really fascinating to think about like H.P. Lovecraft and where he was coming from, trying to engage with these feelings like confronting this cosmic horror, this idea of something that's
Mm.
just indescribable and that sort of thing. So it seems to me that there's a case to be made for suggesting that it can be like this thing that lies beyond the mind. So it's essentially like you have the abyss, and then you have everything beyond the abyss. And the idea of that, as your mind approaches anything that's beyond its comfortable confines, it ends up being overwhelmed with the horror of it. It it is ultimately like a shadow in the sense that the horror is to some extent, self-created and that sort of thing. But really, like if you think about like the way everything you conceptualize, anything you're capable of conceptualizing, understanding, thinking about, putting together, believing to be true, is all the faculties of your mind. So in fact everything you see around you, everything that you interact with, is all in your mind as well. I mean, it's not like I'm not the first person to sort of suggest that the sensory input that you're getting is in your mind already by the time you get it. You're not like, you're not actually getting direct access to the things around you. It's all in your head ultimately when you're engaging with it.
Yes.
So, with that in mind, it's like the idea of trying to conceptualize anything that's beyond your mind is a contradiction in terms because any concept that you're creating is in your mind using the material of your mind or the mechanics of your mind. You can't conceptualize something that's not in your mind. So as much as your mind has like vastness to it, you know so hence the whole idea behind meditation, in my opinion, to a large extent.
Mm.
It's in order to allow all the aspects of your mind, the mechanics of your mind and everything, to fall away, fall silent, so that it's no longer distracting you from whatever's beyond. And hence that's why you can conceive of like that VVVVV thing as being living up there in samadhi constantly or whatever.
Mm.
So yeah, thinking of it that way, it's kind of like you can picture how like just trying to grapple with that can drive you insane. So
Yeah. Okay, I lied. There is one more thing that I wanted to ask you about.
I'm game. I'm
um,
game.
okay, cool. Lucid dreaming.
Hmm.
Did Crowley ever bring that up? Like lucid, like I know that the term may not have existed, but the idea of being aware that you're dreaming while you're in the dream. Does that ever come up within any of Crowley's material or in Thelema in general?
That's a good question. I mean, I don't have anything specific coming to mind, but there's a lot of like astral journeys and things of that nature that are similar to lucid dreaming. I do feel like there's got to be that I'm just not thinking of at the moment, but that would be, I mean, similarly, I would say to astral journeys. The whole idea of an astral journey being that you're, going into a meditative state, trying to astral project, and then go wherever you happen to be going to explore, and
Mhm.
for whatever reason. So, um, yeah, that's a good question. But I don't, not that's coming specifically to mind though.
Right. For sure, there's a huge overlap there between lucid dreaming and astral projection. So, yeah. And part of the reason I brought that up was because of the Cthulhu mythos thing, where H.P. Lovecraft, the vast majority of his stories were heavily inspired by his own dreams.
Yeah, which makes a lot of sense. Yeah. And yeah, like I say, that's what's so fascinating about it, because it feels like with his writings and that it's like it feels like encountering these things that are like a threat, you know? And that attitude, I think, like with, astral projection and that sort of thing, when it feels like you're being threatened, that can create you can create a lot of horrible stuff. It's sort of like a bad trip in a way, but particularly I like this concept of which I've experienced personally, but the idea that if you have like sleep paralysis and that
Mhm.
that horrible sense of dread, one way that I've heard that parsed or read it parsed is that it's actually you just becoming aware that you're astrally projecting and looking at yourself and becoming startled, and then that feeds back to your body, and your body becomes startled, but it doesn't know why, and it can't see anything. And you have this feedback loop of startlement.
That's funny. Um, yeah, I find that the idea of cosmic horror to be incredibly useful, and it connects to me with the idea of uncovering atavistic, elements of our psyche, you could say, even like animalistic, untamed, feral, parts, or even unintegrated shadow aspects, part things that you think are monsters coming to attack you, but really it's a what's the word, disenfranchised parts of yourself that are craving reconnection.
Yeah, that's definitely something that I think I've experienced, and I've talked to other people as well, where yeah, it's almost like you have a part of yourself that was traumatized as a child, for instance, maybe even at a pre-speech stage or something like that, where it's like it doesn't have articulation, it doesn't have the means of communication and that sort of thing, but it learned this self-defense to be defensed to be defensive, and so when approached, it creates that kind of opposition, and then, yeah, trying to reintegrate it requires kind of like, making it feel safe and being able to give it a place to feel like part of the whole and not separated.
Absolutely. And one more connection between Cthulhu mythos and Crowley would be the Simon Necronomicon, the really
Mhm.
popular one by I think Avon Books
Yeah,
that
yeah.
you can find in like almost any major bookstore. You have concepts of like Thelemic concepts showing up in that, being mixed with um, H.P. Lovecraft entities and that sort of thing,
Mhm.
as well as mixed with Sumerian. It's kind of like those three things kind of blended together to create that
Yeah, yeah,
modern grimoire.
the mad Arab, yeah.
Yeah.
um I don't know what he was so angry about, but yeah. uh, no, that was that. You know what's funny is that that was the first book. I mean, maybe it's not that surprising. I don't know, but it was the first magic book that I'd bought because I was like, I think at the time I was like big into Buddhism and that sort of thing. But that book I bought and I was like, I wonder if I fuck with this. And I think I was telling you on our episode on my podcast that the first Thelema book was the same kind of deal. And I think that was a few years later or several years later. But this book, I had bought, and I kind of got a little discouraged when I saw you had to make silver plates and all this sort of thing. But yeah, so maybe that was just another stepping stone towards Thelema. So
Mm.
yeah, but yeah, another mythologizing sort of thing. Like I think mythologizing has its effect. It's like I say, ideas I think of as software. And if like I say, everything, even including our sense input, is in our minds, our experience is software. So of course these things would have an effect on us. So of course Lamb exists as a gray in discrete reality in some way. It may not be reality by the same terms that we like to think of reality when we're getting a coffee during our break at work, but it's reality is reality. There's actually like a chapter in Liber Aleph that I really like, that Crowley puts into the idea that everything is real. It's just a matter of being real in relation to the surroundings on its own plane. So, I mean, of course, like, you imagine something that's real insofar as it exists on its own plane, as opposed to, you don't want to mistake that with the thing that you imagined with the thing that you're going to accidentally cut your hand on or trip over, or get hit by when you're trying to walk across the road. So, yeah, just recognizing the fact that everything does have a reality in its own context.
Mm.
It's kind of an interesting perspective on it.
Um,
And the reason that's relevant, by the way, because I don't know if that's kind of seems like one of those things that doesn't really mean anything anyway. But I guess one way you could think of that is, again, going to the idea of the waves going out. If you have that idea, it's sending out waves just by nature of its existence. So
right.
that's one way you could think of it, as connecting to other levels of reality. It has, it sends out these waves. They have their, based on the context and whatnot, they have their effect on other planes of reality as well. So just to finish that thought.
Yeah. And my own story with the Necronomicon, I purchased a copy when I was in high school, and I got it out of like a sense of novelty.
Yeah.
And I was actually, exploring magic and that sort of thing, and practicing at the time Golden Dawn style inspired ritual magic. Some of it had a bit of tinge of Crowley in it at the time as well. And I bought that Necronomicon and I had it on my bookshelf for ages. And then finally I said, you know what? I'm going to read this. And I finally read it. But by the time I read it, I did have a bunch of experience and knowledge in that sort of thing. And I was able to really appreciate what was in there. And I thought, this is pretty cool. I wouldn't have done it this way exactly. I had some critiques of it, but I thought, you know what? This is actually way cooler than I expected.
Mm. Yeah, actually, you know what? I wouldn't mind going back to it now that you mention it, rereading it. But
Yeah, there's some neat stuff in there. And
and
I definitely thought, you know what? I have been thinking along some of these same lines, although
mm,
I would have taken it in a little bit different direction. But definitely, I had been thinking along some of those same lines myself.
that's how I felt about the Satanic Bible, actually, because again, long before, I think this is when I was a teenager. Um, I was somebody had basically, long story short, I read it, and I think I was, at the time, I had been avoiding books on philosophy or other people's points of view and that sort of thing, because I was doing a lot of meditating in my late teens and wanted to stay kind of purist for some reason. I wanted to just sort of come to determinations for myself without being kind of colored by uh, people's perspectives and thoughts and
Software.
yeah, exactly. So and then at that time I started to open up and try to read these different religions and things to sort of explore different ideas, and the Satanic Bible was one of those things that I got into to be able to read and sort of get a different perspective. And yeah, it was like I was like, yeah, yeah, yeah. And, it just seemed like very, yeah, I can get behind this. And then it got to the dogma stuff, and I was kind of like, wait, no, you're losing me. And I didn't find it until years later that he basically lifted a lot of the ideas from Crowley, in terms of the philosophy end of it and that
Right.
sort of thing. So,
And then he added the Enochian calls
and
and
Shimham
changed some of the
Thrash.
words, and yeah, and just kind of used it to pad out
Yeah.
the page count of
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
book. But yeah, well, I really appreciate our conversation this evening. Um, can you tell us a bit more about what's next for Toronto Thelema and Darkly Splendid Abodes?
Well, we've got a lot more episodes coming up. I'm not sure when you're going to be airing this episode, but we've got new episodes coming out the first and third Fridays of every month, and that's Spotify or wherever you get your as Michael put it, wherever you fuck up your podcasts, and including YouTube as well. So don't be afraid to check that out. It's at Toronto Thelema or aside from that, Toronto Thelema as a social entity, we have our you can check us out on social media. You know how the internet works, but we have our social meet and greet, just sort of casual chat kind of nights, the first Monday of every month, and the second Monday of every month we do workshops. And we might do the odd things as well. We've been doing consistently equinox and solstice rituals ceremonies as well. So that's been great. We haven't missed a one since we started doing them. I forget exactly when. Definitely as far back as 2023, I believe, at least anyway. But maybe even further back. But it might have been late 2022 when we started. Yeah, so I want to thank you very much for having me on as well. I really appreciate it. And
Yeah, it was my pleasure. And yeah, Darren, thanks again for coming on to have this conversation with me and to share it with the world at large. And yeah, I appreciate you and what you're doing. And thanks again.
well, likewise, I appreciate you and what you're doing. And let's do it together.
Absolutely. Have a good one.
You too. 93.